Elmer, E-L-M-E-R.
And the unit that you served in was?
Was always in the headquarters division supply, which is known as G4.
Very good. And the highest rank served?
Staff sergeant.
Very good. And tell me a little bit about why you wanted to be in the 10th Mountain Division.
Well, because I like skiing. When I heard that there was this was a choice, then I thought this would be an interesting place to serve. So that.
Well, what were your other choices? I guess at age 18 you volunteered because you knew that if you did volunteer.
Well, my first choice, I was planning, or I'd hoped to be able to go in the Navy, because that's my first choice, but that didn't work. So then we got our Wenatchee Ski Club president wrote he'd heard about the winter warfare outfit that was being trained, or he'd heard about it anyway. He volunteered to write the 3 letters and to get me and my friend or another fellow from Wenatchee, Don Dallas, but nothing. Didn't hear anything more about it until everybody from Wenatchee was sent to Camp Walters, Texas, which is we learned to dislike Texas very much. It was February of '43 and the most miserable weather you could think of, but it was a 13 weeks basic. After 8 weeks they shipped Don Dallas and I up to Camp Hale, and that's how we got back to Camp Hale.
Now, did I understand you correctly that one guy wrote all 3 of your letters?
Yeah. He was very creative. I think he did. I don't know.
Can I have you move just a little bit this way? Thanks, perfect. Do you have any clue what was in those letters?
No, I don't have any idea at all.
That's too funny. Now, tell me what the enticement was in case you wanted to sign up to be in the Signal Corps.
Well, when they said that, I just forgot all about the Navy. That was the end of it. But the Signal Corps didn't have any interest either. I mean, I didn't. It was just some smart remark that this recruiter made, I guess. And so,
what was that smart remark?
Well, we'll put you in the Signal Corps. Well, I had no idea what the Signal Corps was, and I after that remark, I didn't want any part of it anyway.
And the remark was, do you like to play?
Yeah, do you like to play the radio? Fine, we'll put you in the Signal Corps. Well,
that's very funny. Luckily, you did end up in the 10th. Now, you had a special skill, and tell me what that skill was.
Well, because they saw that I could type, so then they needed a typist in the division supply section, so that's where I ended up and spent the entire time in that same section. Private, 2 months I was corporal, which was fine because you got a little more money, and then a few months later there was an opening for staff sergeant, so I automatically got it, and that was where I stayed the rest of the time. But the money was better as a staff sergeant.
Did you have a sense of how important it was to be in supply in terms of keeping the line well supplied, keeping things moving?
Well, I didn't. I guess I wasn't that astute in those days. I didn't. I really didn't like the Army, and I didn't. And it was all I could think of was, will we ever get back to Wenatchee? Will I ever get back home? So that's my only. Yeah, and it wasn't now that I look back on it, I would like to have stayed in Italy as occupation troops, because that's what they told us first, that after the VE day, that we were the last outfit over, and so that it sounded reasonable that we would stay as occupation, and I had hoped that I had an idea I would like to have learned the language, and then as I mentioned, that my grandfather came from Switzerland, so I thought I might have a chance to take a trip to Switzerland and learn a little bit about where he came from. So, but they said, nope, we're going back to the States, retrain and go to the Pacific. and that was the scariest thing. Because
Tell me a little bit about what it was like for you to be skiing over at Ptarmigan at Camp Hale.
well, I was thinking about, I don't remember how, we must have had access to a Jeep, because I know we didn't hike the entire way, but then to get, we got to where you had to start climbing up the hill so you could ski down, and there was no facilities like on Cooper Hill. It was strictly on your own. But that I remember that hard packed crushed snow, and I think it was like 11,000 feet. It was pretty high, and so it was, yeah, it was a real fun time. You could get away from the headaches in the office.
Now, because of your special typing skills, you obviously were in demand during D series. Tell me a little bit about, how you handled typing during D series.
Well, D series was 3 weeks out in the out in the hills with no and to the section or the Army, they have to have a report every day. We made daily reports, and you needed 6 copies. So try to make so that meant, well, we called them onion skins, a light 5 onion skins and 1 bond original, and then there was 5 sheets of carbon paper. And I didn't realize it, but when in the cold, carbon paper snaps together in a tight roll. So try to smooth that out and put put all this in this little typewriter. It was a real challenge. But then sitting in a snowbank and typing out but the keyboard was just small enough so that when your fingers are real cold, you could still operate the keys.
So how did you actually type? Were you really in a snowbank?
Oh yeah, sitting there. Yeah, there was no place. There was nothing. No furniture. No nothing to sit. No, everything was covered up with snow. That we had mountain tents, but we learned after the first night in the mountain tent, they didn't breathe, and all the condensation from your warm breath came right down on you like rain. And so after that, we just laid it out as a ground cloth.
What sort of things do you remember typing up in D series?
Well, it was just the routine reports that were required. I have no recall of what we did, but the Army, there was certain requirements, and they had to be done. And I had the same typewriter that came from the Army field desk. I've had it overhauled. It's a real joy to type on still.
Tell me a little bit about what your role was in Italy. It's pretty unusual that you, as a typist.
Well, it's still the same thing. Well, I wrote Greg's shorthand too, so that was part of the deal. I could take letters or take dictation, and we had one person who was a court reporter, and and this wasn't in Italy. This was still back at Camp Hale. Whenever, periodically, this guy was an alcoholic. He'd take off, and nobody would see him. And then so I'd get drafted to take oral testimony, and that was beyond I really couldn't take verbatim dictation, and that was a struggle. But they had there was nobody else that could come close. So that was a stressful time. But yeah, I did a lot of taking dictation from all the people in our section, because there was Colonel Burge was head, and then there was well, when he went on vacation, then the major at that time who invented the Nike shoe, Bill Bowerman, was he'd come in and he was head of the section when Colonel Burge took off on vacation, or furlough. So that was, and he was I remember he was pretty interesting. I hear was a tough coach as far as University of Eugene, but he was good to work with at that time. So,
do you recall carrying your typewriter around Italy?
Yeah, well, the only time I carried it was when we were being transported by Jeep. I didn't have to carry it in a rucksack, so I was all I had it in my lap. They wouldn't Bruce Snow wouldn't put it in the Army field desk that was in back of the Jeep, or however we hauled it. I always carried it in my lap. So, but that was only when we had Jeep transportation.
Did you sometimes carry your typewriter in your rucksack?
No, never did that.
Now that would add up, I guess. I'd like to follow up with some other questions. When you think back to your training, can you think of any particularly memorable instance that you haven't mentioned already?
Well, see, I didn't do any kind of mountain training at Camp Hale, because everything was from the day one when I got there. It was all office. It was in the G4 section of the office, and that's where I went every single day. And we had some close order drill, I guess, but not very much, and I can't remember much calisthenics either. We didn't do that as being in the office. It was completely different than what the line companies did, I think. So.
Did you have a sense that it was important what you were doing?
No, in fact, we were there so long it was getting boring. I volunteered to the paratroops, and I'm glad that never happened. I wanted to see something happen, because you're just sitting here day after day, and it was the war was going on, and we weren't advancing. I guess I didn't think I was gaining anything, but then when they shipped us to Camp Swift, Texas, and brought in 5,000 green mules. Then the idea was that every individual was going to have your personal pack animal, and that didn't appeal to me at all either. But the Army found that wasn't practical, because these guys from New York and the East Coast, they'd never seen a mule before. Those things can kick with all any of the 4 feet equally well. And that was a big mistake. So they shipped them. I got rid of all of them. So.
Did you have any personal experiences with these mules?
No, I never got that close, and I was very glad, because I grew up on a farm in North Dakota and I've been assaulted by every farm animal there is. I want no part of them.
You know better.
Right.
That's right. That's right. What was your most memorable experience in Italy? Let's talk about being in headquarters. What was your most memorable experience?
Well, let's see. I guess, and I can't remember places, but one location, the enlisted people, we found this. We moved to this spot. We were gonna make camp, and we found like a barn, and so everyone went in and got a spot and set up our rucksacks and whatever equipment we had. But then the headquarters officers came, and they said, nope, this is for officers. You guys go out and dig your foxholes. So then we went up on the hillside and dug foxholes, and then that night the tracer bullets started coming in, and that building got bombed, and the headquarters captain, I can't remember what his name was, he got killed, and the MP had Major, whatever his name was, the whole floor was blown out, and his cot was teetering on a rafter, and we thought it couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
During the whole Riva Ridge Belvedere operation, what can you recall of that?
Well, see, I don't have much recall. I wasn't even aware of until afterwards of the guys what they went up the head of the mountains and or up the ridge, and I didn't talk to it. Nobody talked about it. It wasn't conversation in the office, and so we didn't even realize that it was going on. I didn't, anyway.
Was it difficult to keep people supplied with what they needed?
Never heard any, no complaints. Nobody ever got really upset and said, you guys aren't doing your job. I never heard that at all. So.
Well, you're in a unique position. You're in headquarters. You must hear things or maybe see things that were maybe a little different that line company men wouldn't see. Do you have any recollection of anything that stands out?
Not really, because as enlisted men, we were, I think Bruce Snow, who was the master sergeant, he was one of the, I don't know how many, one of the very few enlisted men that went to Italy as to search out just how we're going to land at Naples and map out the strategy, I guess, when we got to Italy. So he was involved in a lot more of the background. In fact, when we had our reunion at Sun Valley, that's the first time I'd seen Bruce for a long time, and he was talking about a lot of the things that I didn't even know went on, and he was aware of it. So.
During each particular action, like after Belvedere, Della Terracia, did you have any recollections of any of that?
No. That Campo Tesoro is one name that I remember, and we were there for a month, I think. And it was just like a routine. I mean, it was pretty much routine. We had time for there was no bombing, nothing like wartime at that spot at all. I don't know if we were at another. We moved on, and General Hayes, he wanted, from what I heard, his idea of the headquarters was to be as close to the front line as possible. See, in regular divisions didn't do that, so that I know we were at one spot, and I can't remember that name either, but there was a high. I was behind this kind of a retaining wall, shaving out of my helmet, and here one of our guys were behind us, the mortar guys, and they had a short round, and it exploded right. That's the closest I ever came to getting wounded at all, and that was from our own guys.
Because they like to set up headquarters close to the lines. Were you ever subjected to incoming from the Germans?
Only that when this barn got bombed out, and we could see the tracer bullets coming overhead. That's the closest that's the closest I ever got to any fire or weapons. Then they had these long, it was 155, the big long guns. I know that we'd be going by in a Jeep, and it seemed like whenever they'd always wait until we got right close to before they fired that gun, and it seemed like it would just lift the Jeep off the ground. There was such a tremendous explosion. I don't know if my hearing is diminishing. I don't know if it's because of that or if I've inherited it from my mother was almost stone deaf, so maybe I'm inheriting that. So.
Did you ever wonder if you were going to survive?
Well, I never thought that part of it. I guess it's, I don't know. When I look back on it, all I can think of, I must have been in a fog all the time. I could do the work, and and then a couple of the cooks that were in our headquarters company, they found some off-limits wine, and I used to go with them every afternoon and drink wine. And that kind of eased the boredom, or not really. Really wasn't bored at that place, but it's just the total uncertainty of what's going to happen when, and see that had never been away from home before, and that it was not pleasant. But after drinking wine all afternoon, then I'd come in and do the work. I always thought that nobody would ever know, but Bruce Snow said afterwards the colonel would always he'd get a chuckle out of that. I suppose if I had messed up on the job, then he probably would have done something. But he was very tolerant that way.
What was the reaction of the Italians to the 10th Mountain Division? Did you have any sense of that?
Well, yeah, they the paisanos, we call them. We had everybody was issued a gun. We had a carbine gun, and mine was. I was not much of a marksman, but this carbine had you couldn't adjust the sights at all. But for some reason, mine fired they call it a 6 o'clock bull, bullseye, and it always was at the bottom of the bullseye, and so I liked that gun. I hand polished the stock, and it was really nice. But one day we were waiting for something, and so we were at a tent, and so I set my carbine and pack, and then we went inside and played poker. And finally, when we came back out, the paisanos had stolen my carbine. See, and that's like treason. I mean, if you could get court-martialed for. But at the same time, almost simultaneously, our Jeep driver, the roads were very dusty, and he was driving along and didn't see a 6x6 truck ahead of him, and he crashed right into it, and it threw him out on the ground. He was unconscious, so he was taken to the hospital, and they gave him all new, another carbine. I mean, he got everything new, so he gave me his one that he originally. So that's how I survived that.
Well, tell me about what your impressions were of the qualities of the leadership. How did they inspire the men?
Well, Bruce Snow in our own section, he was very knowledgeable. He was a professional guide from Boulder, Colorado, and so he was a stickler. He wanted things to be done just the way that they should be done, which I kind of it was a good what's the word? I thought. I mean, I didn't have any trouble with him, and Colonel Burge was one of the guy didn't have much formal education, but God, he's one of the smartest men I've ever run into. He was a big burly guy, and never did I ever see him get upset. And people, different times, like some of the general's aides, and they'd be, oh this and oh that, and he said, "No, settle down." He had that Missouri accent, and that, yeah, he was a real stable, like a rock. That guy. My mother would send. I love sardines. She'd send me sardines, and so he could always, whenever, and I'd open a package, would come to the office, I'd open it, he'd always come in because he loved sardines too. he wanted his share. So here, about a year ago, I found some that they're canned in garlic and something else. I forget, best sardines I've ever eaten. So I sent him I looked in the directory and got his address and sent him a can, and then I got a call from his wife, his fourth wife, that she said, "Well, we lost him last year," but she said, "I agree with you, they are good sardines."
Glad somebody enjoyed it.
Yeah, right.
Do you think that you enjoyed a special camaraderie with other people in a position similar to yours during battle?
Oh yeah, the people that worked at the division headquarters. Yeah, that's we had a good group there. And yeah, Bill Terry was in G2, and he and I were the only division headquarters people in Mount Rainier chapter for a long time, but he died here a few years ago.
Did you have a sense when you were in Italy with the 10th that the 10th was making history? No, it was the only thing I recall was how frustrating it was to deal with. See, you
each division was under Corps, 10th Corps, I think it was, and then the Corps was, I don't know how many Corps, under the Fifth Army. Mark Clark was a Fifth Army general, and the 10th Division was a little bit different than a regular division, and they were always totally getting getting things screwed up, and it was frustrating because we couldn't figure out why they didn't know that what we were, but there was always snafus all the time. So that there's Vic Eklund.
What kind of snafus?
Well, I can't recall specific instances, but the things that we would directives we'd get from Corps and from Army weren't. If they had realized that we were, what kind of an outfit we were, we should not have had to have dealt with that stuff, and so it was. It was frustrating, but I don't know of any particular instance. But
how did being in the 10th Mountain Division shape who you are?
Well, I enjoy the fellowship now of the retirees group, and like a friend of mine who's he died a while ago too. He was always saying he was in a different branch of the service. He was about 6 years older than I, but he didn't dislike the Army. I kept telling him how much I disliked the Army, and then he kept saying that he's going to come to one of our luncheons and tell all the other people how if you disliked it so much, how come you go to the lunch? Well, the social aspect is totally different than the.
How about when you were in the 10th, actively in the 1940s, how did it influence you?
Nothing that I was particularly aware of, except that it was just something that was not pleasant, I guess. Because no matter where you went, I always felt that there was somebody that I disliked telling me what to do, and that was totally frustrating. But I learned a lot of patience. Maybe that's what I learned.
What else can be learned from the 10th Mountain Division?
Well, the idea of being in a unique outfit, I guess that was interesting, and now that we go to Paradise Inn once a year, and that we go up there every year, and we Jane and I try to go the night before and get up there early so we can hike up Mount Rainier on that luncheon day. So that, and then go to the fellowship at the different functions that we have now, and and Vic Eklund out there, he's our chapter storyteller. He's always got jokes that are good.
Oh, that's sweet. Does it mean a lot to you to be in the 10th Mountain?
Well, now I'm glad that I was, but I had no idea when I tried to enlist in it that I had not a clue of what was going to happen.
How would you define the spirit of the 10th?
Oh, it's totally unique. We got after the line guys went up the face of Mount Belvedere after the war was over. Then it was written up. We got all the publicity and the other divisions that have come all the way up through Africa, and they weren't getting publicized, and so they were talking about the high percentage of college graduates in this unique organization. And so you'd go to the month or so we were in Italy before we came home, we'd go to a bar someplace, and then there would be some other GIs, and then they'd kind of start sneering, and what school did you go to, then there was always the just about whenever we'd go to a place like that, then you'd see the Nisi Battalion. I think they were 448. Those guys were quiet, and you'd never even know that they were there. But yet they had more awards, I think, than just about any other outfit. Yeah, they were really. I got to know. In fact, our neighbor, Frank Hidaka, was in that group, and that we used to ride the bus together from Alki Point up when I worked downtown Seattle. But
what kind of legacy does the 10th Mountain Division leave?
Legacy?
Legacy?
Well, it's something that they're joining. See, now we have this International Federation of Retired Mountain Soldiers, I guess. I've never gone to one of their international meetings, but that I like the idea of this getting together and trying to use diplomacy or figuring out some way of not having to have go to war to try to settle things peacefully. And that I didn't realize Japan has so many mountain divisions. They've got a whole lot of them, and Germany, that at a couple of the reunions, that the general, and I can't remember his name, but very distinguished, tall Prussian type, and he's always real friendly. But that, yeah, I like that part of it. That now we can be international. Discuss things on a worldwide basis, not just each little part of the world.
Do you think about anything else that you want to put in here? Something that later on you'll say, "Oh, darn it! I wish I had said this or this." Or
well, that's not coming to me now. That no, it's just that. Well, I'm gonna take my typewriter and take it down to the museum in Denver, because I'm gonna put that there with a story of where it went. But we took it to when Jane and I went to Lima, Peru. We lived in Peru for a year. Went to the university there in '51. They were having their 400th anniversary, and that so that I carried it down there, and it doesn't have the Spanish marks that you need, but I would draw those in. But I say that machine types Spanish along with English.
would you say you lugged that typewriter all over Italy?
Yeah, that and on my lap. So you never rode in the field desk with the rest of the equipment. It was always I always carried it, so make sure that nothing ever happened to it.